Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and I think today's video will please many of you. I know some of you at least really enjoy when I do film tarot readings. For those of you who are new, and I just broke 3,100, so thank you all so very much for being here. I really appreciate it. But I have well over 600 videos, and if you're new to this channel, I can't expect you to know all the videos I've done. I have a pretty exhaustive playlist if you want to check it out. But I do a number of film videos whereby I describe a film pretty much scene by scene. And then we do tarot readings at the end from plot holes that weren't explained, or, you know, that kind of thing. And they've become pretty popular. Now, I didn't want to do too much of a frivolous film, even though on the surface it's very frivolous, I'll give you that. But deep under, there's a moral of the story. And it's kind of similar to what's happening today. And it's a reminder that any stage of our lives, power corrupts, and absolute power absolutely corrupts. I'm not saying it exactly the way it was first said, but you all know that quote. The movie that I'm discussing today was released, I think, in 2001 or 2002. It was a Peter Bogdanovich film. And it is a film that takes its, as its source, an event that happened on November 15th, 1924. It's called The Cat's Meow. It starred, I guess the two biggest stars were Kirsten Dunst and Eddie Izzard. Now, the opening credits, when they, and if you haven't seen this film and you want to see this film, spoiler alert, I'm going to ruin I'm going to ruin it for you if you haven't already seen it. So go watch it and then come back. However, many of you have told me that you want to see it after you see this video. So just, make your own choice on that. I don't mind if you pause and come back to it at another time. So the opening credits, we hear an Al Jolson song, Avalon. So it takes us right back to the period of time. Now, I want to say something before I forget. The soundtrack for this movie is incredible. When my husband and I first saw it, and we weren't together in 2001, so we saw it a number of years after that, because we didn't meet until 2007. But when we watched it together, I was so smitten by the music, that he bought me the soundtrack, and I play it on the regular. In fact, I would have had it playing in the background, except that I know that I would have gotten, in trouble with copyright laws, so I didn't. But the music is playing as we see the credits. Now, the first scene is a black and white scene, and we are introduced to the first character that we experience. Her name is Eleanor Glynn. I think they refer to her as Leno in the movie. And she's sort of the voice of wisdom, a little bit, I think we could say. It's funny because as I was watching this, and I'll mention it later, I guess, if I remember, I got a little bit of a West Coast, East Coast, kind of like good witch, bad witch kind of thing, except in The Wizard of Oz, the bad witch was the wicked witch of the West, and the good witch was the good witch of the East. But I think in this film, the good witch is the witch of the, if you want to call her a witch, is the woman on the West, and the one that's more corrupted was on the East. And you'll see who the characters are when I get to it. At any rate, we're introduced to Leno, and she arrives to a destination kind of party in San Pedro Harbor in in Los Angeles, because apparently there's going to be a yacht party given by William Randolph Hearst for, somebody who, a friend of me in business, Thomas Ince. It's his 44th birthday. And quite a number of people have been invited. And when she mentions who the party's for, who the guest of honor is for, we immediately go into another scene where she's remembering something that happened. And it's at this gentleman's funeral. He died under, very suspicious or questionable circumstances while aboard this yacht. And she says, this event, when it's mentioned at all, is only spoken in whispers. And this story that I'm about to relay, which is told in the film, is the most common or the most prevalent, what most people believe happened, give or take a few minor details. Now, it's interesting to note, before I get into all of this, that Peter Bogdanovich apparently was friends with Orson Welles, who you may know if you're a movie fan like I am. Orson Welles created the film I hate when I blank out. Citizen Kane, okay? And Citizen Kane was a thinly veiled story focused on a newspaper magnate such as William Randolph Hearst and his mistress who becomes his wife. And he, William Randolph Hearst, tries to force his wife, who has absolutely no talent, into elevating her to be something she's not, and he tries to make her become a grand dame of opera. It goes against her own grain, and it's just not who she is, and instead of helping her, he thwarts her. Now, William Randolph Hearst himself was married, never divorced his wife, and had a mistress for, he probably had several girlfriends, but he had one consistent mistress for a great many number of years. And she stayed with him throughout his life, and she took care of him when he died. Interestingly, though, as soon as he died, she remarried. Well, she never was married, but she married somebody almost immediately. So there's a suggestion that she probably had other relationships herself, but they had some type of dynamic between them that kept them together. So after, I'm sorry for that diversion. So after the flashback where she tells us that something happened on this yacht and somebody dies on this yacht, then she takes us from the funeral. It goes into full color, and we're at the yacht party. As I mentioned, people are boarding the yacht at San Pedro Harbor in Los Angeles on November 15th, 1924. Now, there are, and the woman who narrates, this woman that I've referenced, who is telling us the story, her name was Eleanor Glynn. Now, she's at the time, she's a real person, she's not fictitious. She was an influential writer and script writer, generally of romance fiction, and as she wrote, her content was a bit scandalous for the time. However, by today's standards, it's very mild. She coined the term it, as in you have it, or you have what it takes to be a presence on stage, or she's an it girl, right? It is defined that magical thing that certain individuals have when they're on the stage or they're on the screen. Now, for those of you who are my descendants and you're watching this, my eldest son has it. He really does. And I was probably the only mother in the history. Well, not really, but I was like a particular mother who I've seen him in a number of his plays, and I was like, wow, you have it. You need to go into film or theater or something, And but he didn't go that route. And he also was extremely handsome. In fact, the first time I saw Colin, what's his name? Hold on. Colin Farrell. The first time I ever saw Colin Farrell on television was probably almost 20 years ago. And I was getting ready for work. And the time I was living in Montana. I lived in Montana for a year. And I was brushing my teeth or whatever, and I would wander in and out of the living room to the bathroom, getting ready and all that. And I see Colin Farrell on TV. And I thought it was my son. I thought it was my son. Dead ringer. They look so much alike. Now, my son is like probably 10 or 15 years younger than Colin Farrell, but they looked an awful lot alike at any rate. So he has it, and it's not just because he's got really good looks, but because he has stage presence, but I digress. So Eleanor Glynn, the person who's telling this story, coined the term, the it term. She, I think, for me, became like the good witch of the West. That's how I sort of seen her. She also wrote stories and articles that for William Randolph Hearst, one of his magazines, and it included a clause for motion picture rights. So she had the right to, have, I don't know if it was exclusive, but she had rights to discuss films, in his paper. She was very famous in her own right, which of course is why he would have had her. She was a quality writer, and it was a something that satisfied both of them, I'm sure. As people are arriving on this boat, we see that the owner of the boat, William Randolph Hearst, has a device whereby he spies on his guests. And as they arrive and make comments at the threshold of the plank when they come to the ship, he hears everything they're saying. So you immediately understand that the owner of this ship has a maniacal need to be in control. And he has, it also suggests that there's a certain amount of paranoia. I mean, who does stuff like that, But anyway. Marion Davies, who is William Randolph Hearst's longtime mistress, who is the person who, is said to very loosely be represented by Citizen Kane, Kane's mistress turned wife, opera singer. This is supposed to be her, but not really. But at any rate, Marion Davies looks out of the window also, and to watch people arrive, and she sees Charlie Chaplin. And we can tell by her facial expression that she's not really happy that he's shown up. She doesn't feel, as we learn a little bit later, that she doesn't feel it was appropriate for him to show up. But he's very flirtatious. At the time, 1924, he had always been involved in scandals, He had an insatiable appetite, apparently, for young women. Now, he, at that time, 1924, had impregnated a 16-year-old actress on one of his films, and so that was a big scandal then, as it should have been, and as it would be today. It would be even worse today, but at the time, it was a big scandal also. So he had a bad reputation. He liked the women, and you don't know if there's something between them or not. You don't know the extent of what's between them, but you know that he is enamored by her by the way he looks at her through the window, and you can tell that she's not happy that he's there. We also know that Luella Parsons is one of the guests, and the people that I'm mentioning were truly people who were there. Now, Luella Parsons was a gossip columnist from the East Coast, and she had, I think she had a small job, by Hearst to just be like the gossip columnist on the East Coast. Because if you recall, for those of you who don't know, the East Coast, and I think in Canada too, were big hotspots for early cinema. And, of course, we had the East Coast had Broadway, and then from Broadway, when the film industry became a thing, they wanted, so the actors who were, on stage, maybe saw an opportunity to do film. And so there was a big there was, an industry here in New Jersey and also in Philadelphia. Now, the problem with the East Coast, aside from the weather, is that Thomas Edison was like a real corrupt individual. Again, another man with a lot of money. And he made it very undesirable for movie makers to produce film on the East Coast. So somebody scouted out and discovered, hey, there's this place called California and it's great, So that's when, people in the teens, I guess, in the early 20s started going to California and established Hollywood. So by now, this 1924, Hollywood is an established place for film. But Luella Parsons was an East Coast person who did gossip columns for the East Coast papers that Hearst owned. Now, as classy as Eleanor Glynn was, Luella Parsons was the polar opposite. She was really tacky and loud. And I think she's portrayed brilliantly by Jennifer Tilly. If those of you who can imagine Jennifer Tilly in a role where she's like, all over the place. She nailed it. I think she did a really good job. Since Thomas Ince, we discovered, arrives with a woman who is not his wife. Now, when you try to find a list of people who are on this ship, her name is not known 100%. However, as stuff gets whispered down, she was believed to have been on the ship. And the woman that Ince was with, who was not his wife, was a woman named Margaret Livingston. She, for those of you who don't know the name right off the top of your head, if any of you have ever seen the 1927 silent film called Sunrise, and I think it had another subtitle to it, she was the other woman. Now, this film was made by Meow, and I think Janet Gaynor won the first Academy Award for that role. I think, don't quote me, but I think that might be true. So Margaret Livingston had done some film, but she wasn't a name that rolled off the tongue. And so she, I can only surmise, recognized, and maybe she fell in love with him. I'm not saying she didn't. It seemed in the film that she had genuine love for this man. But and she seemed to be more interested in their love than she was interested in becoming a star. Like her motivation for being him, at least portrayed in this film, seemed to be more that she wanted his attention and she really cared for him. But, the cynics, would say, well, she was with him to become a more famous star. And I don't think she really ever did, because I believe she retired from acting completely after this happened, or shortly thereafter. About 10 years after, she retired from acting and she, got married to a band leader or something like that. And she just left this life behind. But I just thought I'd mention her. Gossips. As people arrive on the ship, there's a lot of gossip about Charlie Chaplin's promiscuous life, as I mentioned. Marion Davies finally speaks to Chaplin when they're both on the boat, and she pulls him aside where she knows there's no cameras or audio, because she knows William Randolph Hearst. She knows where all his little cameras are. She tells him he should not have come. This was inappropriate for him. Luella Parsons is introduced as Mr. Hearst's most insightful movie columnist. Hearst, who becomes aware that Marilyn Davies is coming up to their cabin, because of course he was spying on her, and she lets him know. She says, Willie, I'm coming up now, so put your paraphernalia away or your surveillance away, because I'm coming up. So she has his number 100%. He removes all evidence of his surveillance and he pretends that he's getting ready in the bathroom. Marion Davis tells Hearst that there's nothing between her and Charlie Chaplin. And he says, well, I've heard rumors. And she says, well, that's all they are. They're just rumors. You know, forget about what you've heard. Now, I guess I didn't really describe who Marion Davis was. She came to Hollywood. She was originally East Coast. She was a Folly, Ziegfeld Folly. And she had to have been cute. She had to have had a nice figure, obviously. But she had been raised in a convent where they were really strict. And, you know, I imagine if you're raised in a convent because you're an orphan, you have nothing. You came from nothing. And she was pretty. And every single night there was this old guy. She was 19. He was 53. Who would come every night and watch every show she performed twice. And he would send her, just like when we see in the old time movies how a chorus girl is like, you know, harassed or admired by somebody in the audience, and he gives her flowers and he gives her presents and stuff like that. Well, that's what was going on between them. And the other chorus girl says, oh, he's notorious for that, you know, so-and-so got him in code or this or whatever. And they told her, like, don't even, you know, don't even. But she became enamored by that, and I guess it must have impressed her. And he was nothing to look at. I mean, God knows he was kind of repulsive, you know. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder, you know. And so for whatever reason, she began a relationship with him. And as I said, it lasted for many years. And in fairness to him, her association with him got her in the movie industry. The only problem was that he had tried to get her to do high art, you know, like, you know, on the level of maybe Garbo or, you know, just serious, you know, roles, you know, where she was better suited for slapstick, or maybe not slapstick, where she would have been better, you know, in a Charlie Chaplin film. Which is an undercurrent thing here, that they're all trying together to do comedy. All these other guys that are on this boat who have an interest in film, you know, they want to entice her to join them for comedy because they could make her a star and she could help them too, you know. But she's loyal to Willie, and Willie only wants her to be seen as a serious actress because he doesn't want to see anybody laughing at Marion. Just like in Citizen Kane, right? His wife, his mistress that became his wife, really wasn't suited, but he had to elevate her because he couldn't really be married to a lowbrow, right? It's kind of like the same thing. Now, Orson Welles in Citizen Kane really, you know, doesn't do Marion Davies justice because she wasn't a no-talent person, right? But I think, you know, Orson Welles really just wanted to twist the knife for Hearst as much as he could. And as a matter of fact, I think I got off track when I was saying in the beginning that Orson Welles seemed to think that he had privileged information about what happened on this boat that night. And basically, the story that Bogdanovich portrays in this film is the story as it was told to him by Orson Welles, who, as I mentioned, seemed to think that he had the inside track. And more or less, what happened on this film, according to Orson Welles, was true. Now, Thomas Ince, who is the guest of honor on this film for his 44th birthday, it's weird, he would attend a party in his honor for his 44th birthday, and yet he'd bring his mistress and not his wife. His wife didn't go. It's a fact that his wife wasn't at this party, which is kind of odd. So you would say, well, if this is a party for your husband, and he's the guest of honor on the Hearst yacht, why wouldn't you go? Why wouldn't you go? So it's probably maybe she didn't know about it, And why wouldn't she know about it? Because maybe it's true that he brought a mistress. But Ince is kind of sarcastic. He's in this life, you know, but he finds it distasteful. And when somebody's like saying, oh, isn't this party great? He's like, yeah, it's the cat's meow. So the title of the film comes from something that Ince mentioned. Ince and his girlfriend have their own private cabin. I think he has his room and she has her room. But what they got, either have adjoining doors or, you know, they're separated for the sake of how it should look. I think she was presented as, she came with him, but maybe as part of his entourage, but maybe it's just like an actress in his, you know, retinue or something. I don't know what the excuse was, but they're having an argument in their cabin because she doesn't want to be kept a secret. And he says, oh, I'll get you, you know, well, if I'll eventually get around to making you famous or whatever. And she's like, I don't care about that. I just want to be your girlfriend. I want it to be known that we're a couple. And Thomas Ince tells Margaret Livingston, his girlfriend, that William Randolph Hearst has a moral code. And she's like, what are you talking about? He has a moral code. He's flaunting his mistress on this boat. You know, he's got a mistress openly on this boat. So what moral code are you talking about? And Ince tells the girlfriend, well, the moral code is for everyone else, not for him. So Hearst is allowed to do what he wants to do. He's got all the money and power. The rules are for everyone else. Now, what does that sound like? Wasn't this a good choice? I can break all the rules because I have all the, not he, but like Hearst, the mentality is that he can break all the rules and he can hold everyone to a higher standard than you, because they, you know, to be in his orbit, you have to be beyond reproach. And he could do whatever he wants because he has the money to hide it. Oh, it's almost chilling. Then we cut to another scene where Ince and William Randolph Hearst speak on the bow of the ship. And Thomas Ince is making a pitch for Marion to join his films in exchange for some publication in William Randolph Hearst's papers. So he said, you know, so Ince, it's known, was struggling financially. For whatever reason, his film company wasn't doing really well. And he felt like I could do both, you know, Marion and myself a favor if you let me have Marion to do a number of films, because, you know, he did, I think, comedy. I think he originally became famous for Westerns, but he was, you know, I also think he had an association with Senate, you know, and, you know, so he, you know, he did a number of different things. And he's like, look, Marion's funny, you know, I could get her in some comedy films, you know, and she'll be a hit, and that will help me out, you know, and then you could put it in your paper. And so she'll be a hit, and it's a win-win, you know, because I'll get some, you know, good PR, you know, if you run it in your paper. And Hearst, of course, because he has a thing that Marion has to be seen as a serious actress, insults him, the guest of honor on his ship, right, by saying that he doesn't need help from a cripple. So this is just the level of lack of decency that this man is portrayed to have had. Cuts to another scene. It's very fast-paced, and it's scene, 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 scene. In fact, I should have mentioned this in the beginning when I started to say that the video was going to be about the cat's meow. It kind of has the feel of the movie Clue, if you remember that movie, you know, going back. It portrayed this period of time. And, you know, people were extravagant, you know, and they had wild costumes, and everything was running from room to room to room, to scene to scene to scene. And this film, I think, kind of runs like that. So I just thought I'd mention it. At any rate, the next scene is Charlie Chaplin goes to Marion Davies's room. And they flirt at the threshold of her door, but she never lets him in, and he walks away in frustration. Sets are opulent, right? Costumes are extravagant. The music is awesome, as I mentioned. I love the music. And there's lots of cynicism on this ship, and a lot of women flirt with a saxophone player. So there's a lot of like innuendo about how people hook up, We learned that William Randolph Hearst, okay, we already learned that. I already mentioned that. Hold on, let me skip that. Well, as I mentioned, he doesn't want anybody laughing at his Marion. They toast to Thomas Ince at this dinner party where they're having saxophone players, where the girls are making contact with the saxophone player. And they're all laughing and gay. And of course, this is 1924, so the liquor was, this was during the Prohibition period. Now, I imagine that William Randolph Hearst could have afforded to import quality alcohol from Europe and Canada, or other countries. But there must have been a certain amount of bootleg stuff that was brought on by the guests, because with Hearst's, false sense of morality, he may not have provided them with alcohol, because the idea might have been, oh, that's illegal, clutch my pearls. He would have some in his own private room, but on the surface for everyone else, he might not have provided it for his guests, so that it's possible that the guests felt like they needed to bring their own bootleg alcohol. So they might not have been bringing the most expensive quality alcohol. So we don't know what the quality of the alcohol was. But it was an overindulgent few days that they were here before a tragedy happened. While they're at the first evening's dinner, the West Coast woman, Eleanor Glynn, tells the East Coast gossip columnist, you want to come out here? I guess Luella Parsons was invited by Hearst to attend this yacht for a little PR on the East Coast about how wonderful the yacht was and how extravagant and what a wonderful host he was, right? So he wanted this Luella Parsons from the East Coast. He invited her. She wouldn't have been there if he hadn't. So he must have wanted her presence there for something that she could have done for him. But the West Coast woman says to Luella Parsons that Hollywood is a living creature. It's not a place. I'm paraphrasing what she says. She says, it's a type of evil wizard. It's a curse. Morality vanishes without a trace. So we're all like sucked into hearing these words of wisdom. And then Marion, she's like, oh, this is way too dark. She just jumps up and says, everybody, let's do the Charleston. And so the mood immediately is taken up a notch to frivolity and fun. And she starts a Congo line, to the Charleston. So William Randolph Hearst adores Marion, but he is too stodgy to join in the Congo line that she started, the Congo dance that she started. The scene cuts to them after the party, to William Randolph Hearst forcing his guests to watch a black and white film that Marion starred in. Now, she seems to be mortified, because remember, he's just always about showing what a great actress she was. And she seems to be mortified, and the others really, frankly, are kind of bored. They don't really want to see it. And the best movies in the film were either when the action cut and the film kept rolling, or I'm not familiar with the film that they're talking about, or it was just a little bit of a slapstick routine in the film. But the best part of the film that everyone woke up to was when she was being silly, and she was being like a, kind of like a comical, and, so that again illustrated that she was much better suited for comedy than for, the stodgy roles that he wanted her to have. The guests break up and go into groups of rooms to party among themselves. Thomas Ince assesses from the party that William Randolph Hearst's Achilles heel is the dynamic between Marion Davies and Charlie Chaplin. And he uses it again to try to take, Marion Davies. He also sees that there's a flirtation, or there's an undercurrent of something between Marion Davies and Charlie Chaplin. And Thomas Ince, is aware that Hearst is aware. So, through his observations, Thomas Ince says, well, I have to try to get him through a different angle. I have to try to say, if she comes with me, I'll get her away from Charlie. Never mind, doing the, comedy thing. I have to change my angle. So it seems as though Thomas Ince was under a lot of stress. He was really floundering. He was, he had ulcers. He had peptic ulcers, So he was a young man, but he had a lot of stress and a lot of health issues. And he was desperate. So he says, look, I'll take her away from this, Charlie Chaplin. And I think he might have had something going on the East Coast. I don't know if he had any film going on the East Coast. I think that was the suggestion, that they were doing a film on the East Coast, and I'll take Marion away. I'll take her to the East Coast, and she'll get away from Charlie, and that'll satisfy your desire to get rid of him. And nothing really came of that conversation, because the next scene is Thomas. I guess William processed it and didn't speak. And so the next scene is Thomas Ince returns once again to his mistress's room, who's locked up in this cabin. Now, in the party room, the guests are playing charades, and all of them are drunk, high on something. They're passing something around. You can imagine what it is. And they're having a great time. And two people who are at this party are Charlie Chaplin and Marion Davies, and Eleanor Glynn is also there. Now, during this charade game, Charlie Chaplin compromises Marion, and they have to play out a role, and so he seduces her, like kissing her, and she's drunk and whatever, under the influence, and she just kind of like leans into it, and she starts kissing him. And as soon as Eleanor Glynn, I call her the Good Witch of the West, sees what's going on, she says, okay, we've had enough of this. She grabs Marion and goes down the hallway with her and says, what the fuck is wrong? Oh, excuse me. Oh, she didn't say that. What the heck is wrong with you? Why are you allowing yourself to become, did you sleep with him? And Marion says, no, I never slept with him. He's just flirtatious, and I seem to be his most recent desire. He wants me, and I don't want anything to do with it, And so that's Marion Davies' explanation to Eleanor, when Eleanor tries to saves her from this compromising thing. And that's that. Now, meanwhile, next scene is back to Thomas Ince and his mistress. You could tell he's really, he's not doing well. He's under a lot of stress. He doesn't feel well. So there is the undercurrent that he's not doing well. Simultaneously, meanwhile, the ship's radio men receive a message from the East Coast, which reads that, what was the newspaper? The Daily News on the East Coast was going to run a story in the morning about a possible connection or love interest between Charlie Chaplin and Marion Davies. Now, since the Daily News was a rival to Hearst, whether the gossip was true or not, they would have run it just to put the screws to Hearst, right? So this is how stuff is done, right? So they get this message, and which reads something like, Marion Davies and Charlie Chaplin seem awfully chummy, and they have several photographs showing how chummy they are. So the radio men run down to Hearst's room to deliver the information that the Daily News on the East Coast is going to run with this scandalous story, because even though it was just them at a party is all about innuendo, right? So, of course, that takes up William Randolph's jealousy up a notch. Desperate, Thomas Ince goes into Charlie Chaplin's room when Charlie's not there. And I guess I forgot to mention this, but at some point, Charlie, in his infatuation of Marion, wrote her like a little love letter, but he realized it was immature. And so he just takes it and he crunches it up and he throws it in his wastebasket. Now that seems to me something that he wouldn't have done, because knowing that William Randolph Hearst is a monster, he would have burned it, or thrown it overboard or something. He wouldn't have left it just casually in the wastebasket. But I think it is just to further indicate Charlie's obsession with Marion. So Thomas Ince wanders in Charlie's room, reads the discarded love letter that he composed for Marion, that Marion never saw. He puts the love letter in his pocket. And once again, he thinks, this will really get Randolph to allow me to take Marion away if he sees the content of this letter. So everybody goes to bed. The next morning, more entertainment, never a quiet, reflectant moment on this boat. It's like the ship of fools, like everyone is just partying all the time, because otherwise they have to look at themselves, which comes up later. Thomas Ince considers using the discarded letter, as I mentioned, to manipulate his hand in getting Marion Davies in one of his films, because he figures Hearst has got to let me out after he sees this letter. Cut to a scene where William Randolph Hearst is spying in his own room from above. He's got like a hole, he's looking down. And he sees that Marion enters the room, and he sees that Marion spots a letter in his pocket, or some kind of letter in his pocket. So she takes it out, she looks around. Now, how does she not notice that he's, anyway. So she takes the letter out of the room, his pocket, she reads it, and she's furious, and she takes it with her. She leaves the room and she takes that letter with her. She takes the letter, or the ticker, actually what it was the ticker tape from the, or whatever it's called, that came over from the radio men. And she takes it to Charlie, and she says, the Daily News is running this story about us, and this is, Willie's going to like blow his top. She argues with Charlie Chaplin. He tries to like smooch with her and stuff, and she resists, and she puts up a really good fight, but ultimately he manages to seduce her. Meanwhile, Thomas Ince does manage to corner William Randolph Hearst and tries to show him the letter that he found in Charlie Chaplin's room, the love letter, but they're distracted by another guest, and Thomas Ince is thwarted. He's not able to show William Randolph Hearst the love letter. Margaret Livingston, who is Thomas Ince's mistress in the film, is disgusted, and she's like, I don't want to be the secret girlfriend anymore. So she goes around when people say, what do you do? Because apparently she's not a well-known actress. People say, what do you do? What's your connection to all this? And she just says, oh, I'm Thomas Ince's mistress. And it actually manages to tell Luella Parsons, which is probably why we hear through the grapevine that she was indeed on the boat, and she was indeed his mistress. I'm guessing that was the leak. That was the weak link. The second evening comes, now with this, at least 2 evenings now on this boat, and that is when they actually celebrate the birthday party for Thomas Ince with a cake and everything. And of course, once again, they're all wearing costumes, and everything is just so much fun and glamorous. Now, because Charlie managed to seduce Marion Davies, and you would think that if he had any fear that there was something between them. You would think that he would have had cameras or a listening device in the room he assigned for Charlie. So that's like definitely a plot hole, which could strongly suggest that this maybe didn't happen on the ship, okay? Anyway, because in the film, they did have their little moment of fun, you know, they're rolling the hay. Marion and Charlie sit across the table from one another, and they're giving each other googly eyes because they're just high off the fun evening they had, or part of the evening that they had. I imagine she went back to Willie, you know, after it was over. And William Randolph Hearst catches it, and he's visibly upset. He sees that it's up a notch, that they're not just like flirtation or whatever. It seems more like he's aware that something happened. Thomas becomes ill at the table as they break into another one of their Charleston dances. Thomas is clearly unwell. Charlie and Marion flirt for the rest of the evening, and Thomas Ince and William Randolph Hearst, as I mentioned, both observe clearly that there's something going on between Marion and Charlie. Thomas separates from the crowd to be alone with William Randolph Hearst and finally shows him the love note that Charlie wrote to Marion. That's all we see. Then it cuts to Charlie and Marion talking on the bottom of a stairwell. They're sitting on steps, and they're just talking. Hearst goes into Charlie's room to just see what evidence he can find that Marion might have been there, and he finds a pair of earrings on the floor by the bed. He's outraged, and because he fears that that's one of Marion's earrings. Now, chances are good if she had like sapphire, ruby, and diamond or emerald earrings or whatever they were. Chances are he's the one who bought them for her. So chances are he should have known it was a pair of earrings that he bought, but because they're explaining things to us, I guess they had to put that feature of it, that part of, you know, in the film. But that's like a plot hole for me anyway. So, but he suspects that it's one of Marion's earrings. So he leaves Charles's room. Thomas Ince again spots Charlie and Marion Davies alone talking on the bottom of the steps. And Charlie, they talked long enough and he's got to leave because if they stay together any longer, they'll get discovered. So Charlie leaves Marion, and Thomas observes that Charlie leaves, and he decides to join Marion on the steps. So he's sitting on the steps with Marion, and he tries to convince her once again, why do you need his permission? Why do you need William Randolph Hearst's permission to join my team? You know, just do it. You belong in comedy. I could make you a big star, you know? And because Charlie, when he left in a little bit of a hurry, he left his hat, his distinguished hat that he always wore. So he left his hat at the bottom of the steps, and, you know, just Thomas went and put the hat on his own head. So he's sitting there with Marion, talking, trying to convince her to join him in film, and he has Charlie Chaplin's hat on. She tells Thomas that she never really loved Charlie. And she's referencing Charlie Chaplin. She's saying, I never really loved him. It was just, you know, for fun and games or whatever. At this moment, William Randolph Hearst, through one of his spying apparatuses, observes Thomas and Marion sitting on the step. But because Thomas is wearing Charlie Chaplin's hat, he mistakes Thomas for Charlie. So, what's he do? He has a weapon that goes bang, bang. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. And he shoots it, thinking that Thomas is Charlie Chaplin. Now, of course, meanwhile, Luella Parsons, the biggest gossip of all time, right? She's wandering the boat in a comical way because she can't sleep or whatever it is. And she happens to enter the scene right after Hearst shoots Ince. And it's a disaster. According to the accounts, he was shot in the head. And it's clearly a mortal wound. He might not die there, but the point was made by the doctor. Well, Lincoln even lasted a couple days, so after he was shot in the head. So there's a suggestion that it's clearly a mortal wound. Maybe we'll keep him alive for a couple of days, long enough to get him off the boat. That's what the doctor says to Hearst. So anyway, she witnesses this disaster, and later on, and his doctor, Hearst's doctor, who was called immediately to the scene, Luella Parsons is hysterical, so he gives her some kind of shot that immediately knocks her out, and to get her out of the way for the next couple of, for the next 10 hours or however long it lasted. Marion Davis, is appalled by what Hearst did. And she's like, why did you do that? And he explains, well, you were making fun of me, or you were mocking me. You were saying you never loved me and that you never cared for me. And it was all about fun and games. And she's like, you idiot. I was talking about Charlie. I wasn't talking about you. So then the ship is diverted to San Diego because it was the closest port. And for whatever reason, Hearst decided that Charlie Chaplin's chauffeur, because it was known that his chauffeur would follow the ship and always be anywhere that Charlie was, he said, let's, we have to, call for Charlie's chauffeur, and because he'll get Thomas Ince to a hospital. Now, in the film, they act like they try to get Thomas to a hospital, but I think in reality, all they did was have the chauffeur pick Thomas Ince up and take him to his house where he died there. I mean, I don't think they ever really took him to a hospital. And the chauffeur, remember, it was Charlie Chaplin's chauffeur, and I think that's a fact. Excuse me. When he told the story to his family and to his wife, or his circle, he said, I picked up a man who had a head wound. I picked up a man that had a head wound. Now, that is something that's factually was said by the chauffeur. So I picked up a man that had a head wound. I thought it was Charlie because I'm his chauffeur, and they told me to pick up the man. So I picked the guy up, and but then I took it to an address, and I realized it wasn't Charlie. So that's a bit of information that's interesting. The other gossip columnist becomes aware that something, the one from the West Coast, the Good Witch, Eleanor Glynn, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way. It's just that for me, I kept seeing those two women as Good Witch from the Wizard of Oz and the Bad Witch, because one was intellectual, erudite, smart, discreet, and the other one was just that kind of thing. So that's how I and because one was from the East Coast and one was from the West Coast, in my mind, I saw the parallel, but that's just me. I've never read that anywhere, in anything. Okay, so she begins to suspect that something's going on, but she doesn't know what. She wasn't there. She didn't see it happen, but she sees things happening in whispers and quiet stuff happening. William Randolph Hearst, we see in a scene, he throws the gun overboard. The mistress, Margaret Livingston, because remember I don't know if I mentioned it, but they had a big fight, and he went elsewhere to sleep for the night because she was so upset with him. She was she threw something at him against the wall, against the door when he left. So the last thing that last words they had together, they were fighting because she was so mad that she didn't want to be a dirty little secret. So he spent the night elsewhere. So she wakes up completely his mistress, completely unaware that anything happened. And she goes to his room, you know, just to make up or whatever, and he's not there. William Randolph Hearst, oh, this is chilling, calls Thomas Ince's wife. Her name was also Eleanor, but I think they called her Nellie, and says, makes up this story, and it's just chilling to listen to him. He says that Thomas had been depressed and unfaithful and had a mistress, and he was devastated because his mistress broke up with him, and that Thomas took his own life. Now, he assures her, Thomas's wife, that he'll make sure that this scandal is not ever printed in any paper. I guarantee that it won't be. Well, of course it won't be, because it's about him and his boat, and he did it. And he convinces her. He says, look, we'll just say it was a medical emergency. He had to be removed from the boat. Nothing about it. But nothing about it was ever printed. I mean, it's a fact that it's known that something happened to Thomas Ince while he was on this boat. And it was never reported in any paper. And it would have been if it was an innocent thing, wouldn't it? Maybe not. Now, while he's lying to Ince's wife, his henchman witnesses the phone call. And you can see on his face the level of disgust he has. Kind of like political people, right? They see somebody, at least not this term, but the last term. There were still people who were in his realm, but they did recognize the obscenity of it. And they kind of let it go, right? Now, nobody in his realm, the second time around, recognizes. They don't care. They recognize it. It just doesn't bother them. But in this film, right here, this guy, this henchman, he knows right from wrong, and he is disgusted by what Hearst tells Ince's widow. He didn't die yet. I think it took Ince 2 days to die at home with his wife. But, the henchman is disgusted, but he says nothing because he knows what side his bread is buttered on. Boy, oh boy. William Randolph Hearst goes into Luella Parsons' room because he knows she's a loose end and he's got to take care of because she witnessed the whole thing. So he goes into her room and he says, look, Luella, I'll give you a nice sweet deal. How does an 8-year contract sound? Exclusive, gossip columnist or, movie columnist for my paper on the West Coast. She essentially blackmails him, and she says, this is a very good scene pulled off by Jennifer Tilly. She says, seems to me you and I have a lifetime contract together. Seems to me it's to our mutual benefit if we have a lifetime understanding. So essentially and in fact, in life, she had a lifetime contract with Hearst. Now, who gives anybody a lifetime contract? Now, factually, it appears that Luella Parsons had gotten that lifetime contract a year before. So it didn't happen on this ship. But she got a lifetime contract from him. So even though maybe she didn't get the lifetime contract in real life as a result of this trip, she must have known something. Now, the innuendo might have been that it was gossiped that William Randolph Hearst and Marion Davies had a child together. And I think they named her Patricia, I think. And, but of course, they could never admit that they had a child together. So the child was given to Marion's sister, who had recently lost a child. And the sister raised this girl, and the girl believed that her parents were Marion Davis's sister and brother-in-law. Now, supposedly, on the deathbed of this young lady, and she was told, apparently, that Marion Davies and William were her parents at some point in her lifetime. Marion told the daughter that she was her daughter, and then William admitted that he was the father. And those two people walked her down the aisle when she got married. Now, why would they walk her down the aisle, not her parents? I don't know if both her parents died. So why would the aunt and uncle walk bride down the aisle? So that's kind of curious, right? And then when the daughter finally died on her deathbed, she supposedly told her son that I was indeed Marion Davies' child through Randolph Hearst. Hearsay? I don't know. I'm just saying. Any rate, so maybe the blackmail that Luella Parsons had gotten a year before didn't have anything to do with the ship, but maybe it had to do with uncovering the fact that they had a kid who would have been born around that time. So I don't know. This is all just hearsay. But the rest of the guests are clueless. They have no idea what happened. And they gather for breakfast in the morning. And Charlie looks out the window and he sees his chauffeur at the port. And he's like, how did you get here? I didn't call for you. And the chauffeur says, well, somebody did. And I was called to take somebody out who, well, I thought it was you, shot in the head. And I took him someplace. I took him to a hospital. In the film, they pretend they took him to the hospital. But the guy died at his house, so I'm not exactly sure what happened there. Unless why would a hospital release a man who was shot in the head to go home? It's not likely. So I think that in reality, the truth was that the Ince was just taken home to die at home. So Charlie learns that the chaperone was indeed called for expediency's sake to be the one who removed Thomas from the party. Now, William Randolph Hearst tells the remaining guests at breakfast to keep quiet about this affair. We don't need the bad publicity. None of us need the bad publicity. But he doesn't tell them that Ince was shot or killed, or anything like that. He just says, oh, poor Thomas was sick. He wasn't feeling well. And we just don't, and he had to go home. But you know how the gossip will be, and everyone will talk about, like, why was this trip shortened? Why did Ince go home? And why did he die? So we don't need any of that innuendo and gossip. We'll just never talk about it. And everybody maybe was given a sweet deal. The mistress, Thomas Ince's mistress, was never told what happened while she was on that boat. I'm sure she learned later, and probably why she got out of Hollywood. I would. But she never learns what happened to Thomas. She just heard that he got sick. And so she goes to William Randolph Hearst and she says, but I was his partner. Why didn't anybody tell me? And why didn't he ask for me at least? And William, in the most cold way, just looked at her and said, you're nobody. You're just the mistress. Why would anybody tell you? That was kind of chilling. So, another point is that William, the character in this film, believes his own lie. He believes his own lie. He tells a lie. He repeats it a number of times. Everybody believes it. But he promises her that she'll have a big future in film. He'll make sure her name is known everywhere because he thinks that's what she wants. But it was never in the film what she wanted. In fact, as I mentioned, she disappeared from the scene. So he may have settled her with some money or something as hush money. But she didn't use it for, she just used it to have a good life. And she went abroad. She left a number of months later. Within the year, she left and went to live abroad. Finally, William Randolph Hearst confronts Marion Davies and Charlie Chaplin, who he finds talking together. And he produces the earring. because there is a scene where he's tearing apart, after he finds that earring in Charles' room, there is a scene where he goes back into Marion's bedroom to search for the other earring that she took off to wear something else, for the party. Because he wanted to find the matching earring, because he wanted to be sure before he did his rash thing that it was Marion's earring. But we don't see that he finds the earring, but apparently he does, because when he goes to confront them, he shows them. This is your earring, Marion. You definitely were with him. I know you're lovers. So, Marion decides, after this goes down, to stay with Willie. And angrily, after Willie leaves, angrily tells Charlie to leave the room. Charlie, now this is kind of out of character, I would think, begs her to leave with him. Don't go back to him. He's a murderer. He's crazy. Look what he did. Come with me. You can be in my movies. We'll have a really good time, And she's like, really, Charlie? I'll have a good time for a day. Really? Or I'll be the girl of the month, and then what happens, But he's like, now, common sense women, no matter how wild Charlie was, I would think, if I was in her situation, that I would get off the boat with Charlie, because at least Charlie's not crazy. Well, I mean, he's morally depraved, he's got his own issues, obviously. But why would you stay? Why would she have stayed? Right? But she decides that Willie needs her, and she loves Willie, and she's going to stay with Willie. And she tells Charlie to leave. I don't want anything to do with you. And he begs her to come with him, and she refuses. Thomas dies 2 days later. A story was concocted, as I mentioned, that he had died from, what did they say? He died from a heart attack brought on from indigestion. No inquest or autopsy ever occurred because his body was readily cremated. However, in real life, there was a viewing of his body for 1 hour before his body was taken to be cremated. So there was, as fact, that his body was viewed, and people attended the funeral, or the ceremony, not the funeral, the ceremony, the memorial, I guess, and people saw him, and nobody said, oh my God, his head was blown off or anything like that. So there's that. Now, it could have been he was shot elsewhere, but the chauffeur, remember, insisted that somebody's head was bandaged up, and it looked like the person had a serious head injury. Now, unless a mortician could have done some fancy footwork so nobody would have seen it, maybe it was from behind, so maybe the front of the face, because the bullet stayed in the head. The bullet never exited. There was no exit wound. So the bullet stayed in the head, and it was, in the film, it was, suggested he was shot from behind because he was looking down, kind of down at an angle. I mean, I guess it's possible that the wound could have been in the back and it never came out, so nobody would have seen it. I guess that's possible. No two accounts of that event were ever the same. And as I mentioned, the story, as we learned it in this film, was told to Bogdanovich as Orson Welles told him. Now, interestingly, the film ends kind of in the same way that it began, with Eleanor Glynn, the West Coast movie columnist, reflecting, because now she's come back to the present time, telling us that she has a recurring dream, that they're all back on that ship, on the Oneida, which was what it was called. And she realizes that they're all foolish, reckless, superficial people. I paraphrase what she says. She didn't say it that way. So she has this moment of clarity in the dream where she realizes that they're all just superficial. And then she catches a glimpse of herself in the window, and she has a serious look at herself, her reflection, and then she snaps out of it and she says, but if we stop, then we'll have nothing. And so she just goes on in the dream being happy and marrying, doing the Charleston or whatever it was they did. So I really enjoyed this film. I mean, I don't think it won any awards. I don't think, it was given any great accolades. Maybe I was wrong, I don't know, but I don't think so. But I thought it was a good film. And I think it touches on topics that are very topical. Now, we're already an hour and 10 minutes in, and I have 3 questions. Should I do the 3 questions here, or should I do it in part 2? I don't have you here to tell me what to do. I think I'm going to do it here. Okay, now, unless I make a mistake and something happens and I have to do a part 2, I intend to do the reading right now. I have to get a sip of tea, though. I'm parched. Okay, first question. If the story really happened as described in the film, if it really happened this way, realistically, wouldn't Marion have left with Charlie? So I guess I don't really want a yes or no response. I just want to I have a better question. I'll ask, what was the real relationship in real life between Charlie and Marion Davies? What was the nature of their genuine relationship like? And that might, shed some light on, was there an affair? We'll get a sense if there was an affair between them. And I really thought, though, that she would have, I really thought that she would have, after something that bad, would have left him in a minute. But it stands to reason, however, if she really did have a child with him. That wasn't addressed in the film, but if she really had a child with him, that would have been a tie that bonded, wouldn't it? That would have been a bond. So no matter how much maybe she wanted to go with Charlie, maybe she never would have. That's a distinct possibility because they had a child. I don't know. Okay, well, anyway, that's the first question. I'll go off in my meditative place. I'll ask the universe to give us whatever we need to know to satisfy our curiosity, not necessarily the whole truth, but just what we need to know, what the universe is willing to let us in on. And what was the real nature between Charlie Chaplin and Marion Davies? Now, for this reading, for these readings, I am using the Fortuna Tarot, the Opal Omen, because it's so hard for me to do it with the camera between us, so I'm not going to do it. Because I want something kind of Art Deco-ish, and this fits the bill, so I'm using it. Okay. What was the genuine nature between them in real life? Princess of Elixirs. Okay, so she was emotional. There was an emotional attachment on her end, perhaps. She was emotionally attached. 4 coins, friendship, stability. She understood whatever there was between them, there was maybe an understanding. Let's see what this card in the, okay, Princess of Candles. Again, it could be referencing her, it could be the daughter between her and William. Or it could just, suggest that she had a clear understanding of what she had to do. But it doesn't look like there was anything unpleasant with her and Charlie. And because I don't give the court cards any numeric value, I would only go to 4. And the 4 would be the Emperor. So let me pull it. Okay, so 4 being the Emperor, to me that suggests like the ever-presence of William Randolph Hearst, doesn't it? Charlie was probably more famous, than Hearst, in that he was a big movie star. He was very popular. He had a lot of fans, and he was about as big a movie star as a movie star could have been at that time. But I don't see him as the Emperor. I see this as somebody who has the ability, who holds a lot of power. It could be corrupt power also, right? So I think she was held to William. I think she was held to Willie. Maybe there was a little bit of fear. Maybe there was, interestingly, and I forgot to mention it while I was doing the reading, the video rather, doing the reading of the story rather, that, Patricia Hearst, his granddaughter through his wife, wrote a book in collaboration with somebody else called Murder at San Simeon. And San Simeon was their, Marion's and William's, castle, right? And in the book, she says that there was a murder at San Simeon, and that due to the, relationship between Marion and Charlie Chaplin. Now, it could be that Patty Hearst would have, obviously, the family, the lineage that she came down through, would have seen Marion as a outsider. She disgraced the family. I'm sure they blamed her, not him. And so that might have been something that she wrote to disgrace Marion Davies. I'm just putting that out there. But at any rate, I think, the relationship that she had with Charlie, Marion and Charlie, maybe there was some physical stuff, but I don't see that it was a heavy-duty love affair or anything like that, if there was that kind of thing happening. I think she was an emotional girl, full of love. Maybe she loved him in a friendly way, but I think ultimately they had a business, understanding. I think it's possible, I can't think off the top of my head any films she did with Chaplin, but they may have. I just can't think of them off the top of my head, but she may have collaborated with him in certain things. And, but I think maybe that this was the child. This could represent the child, or if it's not the child, right, a younger person, then it might just represent Marion having an understanding, clarity about what she, wanted and needed. And whatever the reasons that tied her to Hearst, I think ultimately obviously she definitely remained loyal to Hearst because she stayed with him until he died. Interestingly, she married somebody just a few weeks later, like two or 3 months later. Weeks as in a couple of months. But, I guess sometimes people marry somebody that they've only known for 2 or 3 months. Or maybe it could have been somebody she had been in love with for a while. I don't know. Okay, the next question I wanted to ask is, how did Luella Parsons manage to get a lifetime contract with Mr. Hearst? If it wasn't from what happened on this yacht, what was the secret? You don't just get a lifetime contract with somebody like Hearst. And she wasn't that great, you know what I'm saying? So what was it? Now I'm going to go off in my meditative place and I'll return with the read. Alrighty, how did Luella Parsons manage to get a lifetime contract from William Randolph Hearst? She got it. She got it somehow. I don't usually, that's 4 of coins, I guess, like 4 of swords, I guess we can think of it. But I don't usually use them when I do read. Any ones that fall out, I might look at it, but I don't really put a lot of import on it unless it pops up in the reading, and then I'll know we better pay attention to that particular card. Okay, 3 cups. Okay, social. Something happened in the social arena, perhaps. Now, social, I think I see batons as social, but if we see, look at the nature of these cards, there's sort of like and it almost looks like a Eucharist, doesn't it? Like there's a moon, but over the chalice, but it almost looks like a religious thing. At first I was thinking of toast, but this looks different. This looks like they had a mutual understanding that was bigger than both of them. That's very interesting. Okay, let's see what the next card is. The moon. Ooh, secret. Clearly a secret. She found out a secret. Okay, that makes sense. She found out a secret. And the Six of Cups is exponentially larger than the Three of Cups. So they had a understanding for sure. Okay, 3 and 6 is 9. 9 and 18 is, I think, 27. Let me go off camera because I got to do it with a calculator because you know how I am. Now, in this deck, the Pope, or in the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, it would be called the Hierophant. It's called the Oracle, and yet we have the accoutrements of a Pope, right? We have the keys to the kingdom. We have the triple tier cross. You know, again, we have what looks like a Eucharist, maybe. You know, and but then we have the word oracle. In a way, she was kind of like an oracle because she wrote what seemed to be the gospel truth. You know, a lot of people believe the gossip that she spoke. So an underlying thing would perhaps been, you know, whatever she said was the gospel truth. It was believed by a lot of people. So maybe with the understanding that he need to make her happy, and there was something up. I'm not seeing what the thing was, but clearly there was something between them that was a secret. There was a secret. It almost looks like religious or spiritual in some way, but you know, I don't know. 6 is a perfect number, so they had a perfect understanding. And it could, you know, now if we look at this as him being orthodoxy, you know, if we think of what the Pope is it's like strict, you know, it could be counsel. Okay, it could be that. We'll get that out of the way. But it also could be like a strict adherence, like how he was, you know, on the surface, he had to uphold his pious nature. He had to look, you know, he had to uphold how he looked, right? He how he thought he looked. I think Marion Davies, I know it's like 80 years later, 100 years later, we all know he had a mistress, so it's not any big secret. But he fooled himself into believing it was, you know? So I guess he felt like he had to, this is doing double duty. I think he felt like he had to keep himself looking moral and prevent her from speaking what she knew, because it would have destroyed his thing. So we aren't being told what it is. It's a secret. It's a secret. Now, some people can say, well, the moon can have to do with, like, you know, it could be relating to the daughter, the secret daughter they had. Maybe. We have cups, we have water, we have the moon. It could reference female, something female. It might have just been, like, she might have been one of the earliest people to recognize that he had a mistress. It could have been simple like that. And in, you know, his moment of, like, not letting it be known to the rest of the world that he did have a mistress, maybe, you know, Luella was just one of the first persons who knew he had a mistress, and he wanted to shut her up about that. It could have been that. It could have been things related to womanhood, like a baby. But it's not being spelled out, is what I'm saying. It's just a secret that they took to their graves, I guess. I like to do things in 3. I'll go off camera and try to think of another question to ask, and I'll be right back. Okay, the third question I came up with was, what did Ince's wife believe? Oops. What was it that Ince's wife believed? I don't want them to be I don't look at them if there's more than one. I don't really, because it's just more like a bad shuffle, you know. King of Keys, King of Swords. What did she really think happened to her husband? You know, did she believe William Randolph Hearst's story was that he just got sick on the boat? That's what she always said whenever she was interviewed, or anyone ever, you know. Alida Gray, who was Charlie Chaplin's, I think, second wife, quoted,
I think it was, no, she spoke to Marion Davies about something else. Never mind, it wasn't Lita Gray. Well, somebody who's, anybody who spoke to Ince's wife maintained that she went on public record as saying, my husband died from, a heart condition. That's how he died. But, if her pot was sweetened with some money as an incentive, maybe if she wasn't, they weren't seeing eye to eye, because he obviously had a mistress and he didn't take her on the yacht, you know what I'm saying? So maybe no love lost there. I don't know. But what did she really believe? What did Ince's wife really believe? Eight of Swords. Okay, it's a number of lack of chaos. Maybe she wanted to believe an organized story, communication, right? Swords for me is could be, it's air, so it could represent communication. So she wanted to believe, and she wanted it to be believed that it was an organized explanation. Seven of Fire, right? Seven of Batons, Seven of Candles. I'm not sure. I'll have to come back. Another card of the Suit of Swords or Keys. This is social. I guess she wanted to keep her social standing, right? I see batons as social, right? And transcending, number 7 for me is a transcending number. Moving forward, she wanted to move forward with no scandal. I guess she wanted to move forward with no scandal. Okay, let's see. 8 and 7 is 15. 15. 8 and 7, 15. 15 and 2 is 17. Let me pull the star. Oh, cool. The star card was right there. It was the one at the bottom of the deck. So the star card, in the context of the question of Hollywood, was that she wanted to retain I guess she didn't want to soil her husband's name. Maybe she just wanted to, she saw it as an opportunity to have it go down in the history books, as a I don't see that she felt anything that was treacherous or wicked. I think she just wanted to let it go down as in Hollywood fashion, in the Hollywood way, in the star way, right? I'm looking at this in the context of the question. She was thinking maybe of, the legacy for her, if they had children. I don't know if they did. I'm assuming they must have. Maybe they did. So I think she was seeing the eternal picture, the big picture. And the big picture is keep her social standing, let the gossip be quelched. She moves on in life. She accepted it. And I guess she believed, or in her heart, that whatever it was okay to, whatever the reality was, she was okay with it. She was okay with just stating the status quo. That's the feeling I get. So it doesn't seem as though she was bothered by what the truth was. That's chilling too, because we don't know what the truth was, do we? She just wasn't bothered by what the truth was. So friends, I hope you thought that this was worth the wait if you've been waiting for a movie video. And I thought it was a fun one. And it was also one that is kind of topical, isn't it? How power is and how people can be motivated by power, wealth, and also there's a certain denial. Don't look at yourself too carefully.
you know, and you see how you would allow something to happen, right? The henchman didn't look at himself too carefully. Perhaps, I don't want to speak against Insa's wife, but if the cards suggest this, that, you know, she was okay with how it got wrapped up and tidied up. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of an interesting movie to pick. And the readings I thought were kind of interesting as well. Until next time, friends. Peace, stay well, be kind.